Hi, you guys, and welcome back to the podcast.
We are the Karwells.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Sarah, and we are, as you know, Airbnb interior designers and investors. Welcome back, everyone, to Catch Up with the Karwells. Today we have an episode all around Airbnb data, brought to you by John Bianchi. I just learned that I have been saying his name wrong for the entire existence of knowing him. But he is Canadian and we are from Michigan, and so he said Yankee with a B.
Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, nailed it.
That now it's burned into my brain. So every time I talk about you, I'm like, John Bianchi with a B.
Yeah.
But we're so excited to have him on. If you guys don't follow him on social media, this is definitely someone you will want to follow for all things Airbnb data. But John, for those of our listeners who are unfamiliar with who you are, why don't you walk them through kind of your elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and how you got started in short-term rentals?
Perfect. Sounds good. Nice to be here, by the way. Just kind of want to start off with that. Always appreciate you guys, having me here, and it's always fun talking with you. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm John Bianchi, the Airbnb Data Guy. I am the head of data for TechVestor, which is one of the largest short-term rental investment funds in America, which you guys know very well. And I also have 3 free Airbnb data courses on YouTube that you can go through and learn pretty well everything that I know. I have an Airbnb data software that I'm coming out as well with very, very shortly. And then on top of that, I do Airbnb data consulting. So I help people be able to buy profitable properties. And the whole reason that I do what I do is to ensure that nobody buys an unprofitable property again. That is my slogan. That's what I work towards. Everything that I do is working towards that. And I can talk about that because I've helped TechVestor buy 72 properties in the past. 120 properties, but we have 72 of them that are up and running, and every single one of them is profitable, right? So not a single one of them was a miss or a dud or whatever. And the data and the process helped me be able to do that. And I think that that's all the proof that you need, right? Because we did that in 18 months. So it's it's pretty impressive, but it works is what I'm trying to say. So anyways, for anyone who doesn't know me, that's me.
Yeah, I remember when we got introduced to you and we got to kind of walk through your process. I was like, oh, he's really into the data. Okay. And our audience knows that Sarah and I are not numbers people. We're not data people. We are very much gut instinct people. And so it's really nice to have people like you who are in the industry who are your gut instinct is nice, but let me put some data behind it so we're not screwing our investments.
Yeah. That's actually what you just said there, not screwing our investments. That's actually what sparked a lot of my obsession with the data. Is I brought on investors and I was like, I got to get this right. You know what I mean? And I just went deep into it. So that definitely matters.
Well, and the data can be hard to read. It is intimidating. For our listeners who are familiar kind of with mine and Emily's whole entire story, when he says he works for TechVestor, we were representative of Superhost Labs, which was alongside TechVestor, kind of their marketing side of things. Now it's just known as TechVestor, but it's the exact same fund. So John is very familiar with the same wheelhouse that we kind of first learned how to raise capital, first learned how to analyze a deal, first learned all of these sorts of things when we really were heavy in design and social media only. And before we get into your Airbnb horror story, which we will circle back to, I want to point out one thing as well for our listeners. When Emily and I were working alongside Superhost Labs, they had a proprietary technology that would analyze a bunch of deals in a market where you wouldn't have to actually do it yourself, right? It would do a lot of the legwork for you. And one portion of that was just jaw-dropping to me at that point in time, because we were working so much off of gut instinct and not numbers girlies, was that when that program would analyze all of these deals in a market, 94% of the deals that it would analyze were not profitable Airbnbs. And so I think that there is this overall perception, because of how Airbnb started, when you could just get a couch off the side of the street, put it in an apartment, throw it online, and it be profitable, that maybe still exists in some people's mentality towards short-term rentals. But that's not the case, right? Especially now with interest rates where they're at, it is exponentially harder to find a profitable deal. And so we have had our bad habits broken as well, a lot inspired by you and working along Superhost Labs / TechVestor, that you have to get into the numbers if you're going to purchase in the existing market as it stands today, because 94% of properties are not profitable.
That's I'm actually really glad you said that, because a couple of reasons. First off, I would actually say that it's probably less than 94%. Whenever I've done my research, it's very, very few properties that will actually work out, at least at the cash flow targets that I want to hit. You know what I mean? So I would say it's even less than that. And then the other idea of it being very difficult nowadays to be able to find properties, right? Especially with the interest rates. That's what everybody's talking about. Everyone knows that there's less inventory on the market. Everyone knows that there's less people buying homes. Like, it is what it is right now. And I'm excited about it because we're still buying properties. I can still find properties that cash flow very well. So I'm like, in my take, I'm like, this is a perfect time for me to be able to help other people, teach other people, show them exactly how to do it in the worst possible scenarios. Like, this is the hardest time to buy, but you can still find it. And then when it gets easy again, you know what I mean? Interest rates come down, more homes are available, more people are traveling, economic can start booming, and you have this skill of like analyzing data. Imagine how much easier it's going to be to just find like home run after home run after home run, right? So yeah, I think it's like a perfect time for people to understand what I do and understand it in more depth. So I'm hoping to be able to teach more people that, but I'll get into that later. So.
Yeah. Right now, it truly is hunting for a good deal, and hopefully, when the market shifts, it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Exactly. Like, I'm excited for when the market shifts, but at the same time, I'm not going to wait, right? Because it is what it is. So, but yeah. Anyways, just want to kind of my 2 cents on the things that you just mentioned.
Amazing. Well, as all of our listeners know, before we get into all of the nitty gritty with John on the data side of things and finding profitable B&Bs, you guys know we start with an Airbnb horror story. So, John, as you know, our listeners are starting to learn, you have been involved in so many purchases of B&Bs. What's a horror story that you've gone through that you want to share with our listeners?
So I was just on Jeremy's podcast, Jeremy Worden. I know you guys have been on his podcast as well, so I'm sure you guys share some of the same listeners. And I talked about an Airbnb failure that I had down in Scottsdale on a couple of properties. And it's actually like that podcast just released, so I was just listening to it. And I'm not going to tell the same story, because if people listen to that one, they're going to also listen to this one, right? So I mentioned that I had like other homes that I actually screwed up on with as well, right? For my own Airbnb business. And so the one I want to talk about, or a couple of them actually, is the very first property that I got was an absolute failure. Like, it just was such a failure, because the way that I analyzed the data, it was in downtown Detroit. And my thought was that if I were to look at the calendar of an Airbnb and then see what their nightly rate is and figure out, what their occupancy might be for the next year, and then just do the math quickly, I can understand, what the potential revenue would be for an Airbnb, which I know is outrageously wrong nowadays. And there's so many reasons why without getting into it, but it's one of the worst ways you can figure out the annual revenue for a property. And anyway, so I thought this property will do amazing, right? And I went and I rented out this home in downtown Detroit, and didn't get the approval from the landlord that I could do it. I just did it. And first off, that was the 2 huge mistakes, right? So one, the property would have never made a penny because I paid way too much for the rent. It was in the wrong location, and I would have lost money no matter what on the property. However, I also got evicted within the first month. And so within the very first month, they're like, "You're evicted." And I was like, "Awesome." I'm like, but I happened to meet someone the day before who did midterm rentals. And I actually just was like, "Hey, can you take this over and turn it into a midterm rental?" And they're like, "Yeah, we can." And so I actually lost like $10,000 on the furniture in a month, which was how I started in the Airbnb game. And I still didn't quit after that one. Shortly after that one, I actually went and got another property just on the outside of downtown Detroit. Did a similar, I actually used AirDNA at this point, but really had no idea what I was doing on there. And found a property once again, paid the rent that would have been too high, would have never actually made money over the entire year. Mind you, at the time, I thought that they were good deals because of the way that I was analyzing it. When I look back at it now with all the knowledge that I have, I realize how foolish I was with such limited knowledge, right? But just trying to make it work is what it is. I learned from both of those. I learned a ton from both of those. And like I said, I raised money, went to Chicago, and the next 4 homes I got all were like bangers, right? Like they were great. So learn from your mistakes, right? Always, it's okay to make a mistake as long as you can learn from it and try and do better the next time. And so that's my horror story.
I love that you say that you got
Yeah.
into it without necessarily having approval to get into it. I feel like so many people, that's how their journey starts. And it's like sometimes you
Yeah.
don't even know. Like you're like, "Oh yeah, it's mine. I rent it. Why can't I do it?" And then you're like, "Oh shoot, no. That's not how this
Yeah.
works."
There's
Yeah.
like lease terms. Like, what
Yeah.
goes?
Yeah. There's lease terms. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's, it's learning. You just learn as you go. Like there weren't 10 podcasts on, short-term rentals when I got started back in the day where you can learn all these things, but it is what it is. And you just kind of pick up and keep going, right?
Yeah. What made you decide to keep going after those first two failures? Because, I have a very similar story in starting where it just was like sucker punch after like stupid mistake after stupid mistake and just being like blindly resilient through it. So for you, after those two failures, why were you like, no, I am still hanging out here after just like not making it work?
That's a good question that I've never really put a lot of thought into. So my gut reaction to it is that I'd read that other people were successful, whether that was true or not. Thinking back on it, like I had read different articles about people and read their stories and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, are people making money here? And then I had access to AirDNA at that point, and like AirDNA blew my mind, obviously, with the career that I've made now, because I was able to see how much people were actually making. And I think like when I think of almost any other industry, you can't see that. You can't see how much every subway makes, right? And like trying to figure out what is the best location for a subway or how much every single McDonald's makes. Like you can't see those things. But if you could, then it would be really easy to be able to raise money and be like, let's go open up a McDonald's. Look how much money we're very clearly going to make, right? And so to me, it was this like very being able to see exactly how much almost every single Airbnb was making was like such a straightforward way to be able to do the math to figure out if there was money to be made. And I did, right? I was like, oh, I can make like if I rented out this property, I can make $20,000 to $30,000 of cash flow from it. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. What if I got 10, right? And then it's like, well, how much is that going to cost me? Where would I get that amount of money to be able to do that? And I was like, well, I could go talk to these investors. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, that's a business that I could build, right? And I think I knew the possibility because of that. And then again, at the time with the place in Detroit and the one just outside of Detroit, I didn't know they were failing when I had them for the first however many months. That's the one thing that probably nobody talks about, is that you don't know you have a failure until about a year in, right? Until you've gone through all the seasons. Then you close it up and you walk away and you don't tell anybody, right? That's usually how it goes, right? You're like, I didn't fail. I just wanted to close it, right? Like, and it is what it is. But yeah. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that I didn't know I was failing at the time. I was just like learning and I was trying to figure things out. And I knew that there's a business model here and there was some money coming in, right? But I was like, all right, let's keep pushing. Let's keep trying to find a better one. Let's keep trying to get a little bit better, right? And that's kind of how it continued to go.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's so true for so many of us that have been in the industry for a second, right? Like, we've been in the industry for 4 years, but literally, like, I want to say that the bulk of it has been 2 years, because the first year was like, okay, we have one apartment that's like kind of working, and the second year was we took it from 1 to 4, and then COVID hit, on top of the fact that we put our furniture in bad units, on top of the fact that that apartment complex wasn't built correctly, on top of the fact that we hired horrible management, XY, like, so many factors working against
Right.
us. And so it felt like the first 2 years were just like, what did we get ourselves into? Like, this is horrible.
Right. Right.
But it feels like a rite of passage unless people go the route of educating themselves first with things like what you put out online for free for people to consume, so on and so forth.
Well, you just said, it's like a rite of passage. And I think people like us nowadays are trying to help people not have to go through that. Right. So the presentation that I did in San Diego at STR Nation was called Getting It Right from the Start. Right. So it's like the whole thing was based on let's not screw up on the first one, because there is a very clear process to ensure you don't. Right. And so yeah, I don't think you need to go through those horror stories. I especially don't want people to, because I don't know. I've heard some bad horror stories, and we might get into it in a little bit, but with some of the questions that you might have. But yeah, people don't have to go through the horror stories for it to work out in the long run, right?
Yeah. Well, and especially if you're like for us, it was like, it was 20 grand, which at the time took me a year to save up. And that 20 grand we poured into these properties and then they're not profitable. I get robbed. Like COVID,
Yeah,
so many things happen and you watch
right.
that 20 grand just like, it feels like you just like shoved it down the drain, like flushed it down the toilet. And then when people are looking at starting out purchasing a property, it's like in addition to the 20 grand that you're spending in furniture on something like this, you've also got a down payment. Now you're on the hook for a mortgage. Like,
Right.
it's not a small amount of money that you are pouring into this idea out the gate. And especially with how difficult it is to find deals, if you're not figuring out how to spot a deal that actually pencils on paper before you purchase it, that's a huge gamble to make. That's not investing. That truly is gambling. So we have had our eyes open to that over the last couple of years for sure.
That I couldn't agree with more, right? That's why I do what I do, to make sure that people don't buy an unprofitable property ever again, right? Because like it is possible, and there's like, I'll tell you the one story that I was going to say. It's just, I know this one, I don't know her personally, but I heard it from a good friend, and he had talked to her, and she had bought a home in Gatlinburg, and the value of the home dropped by $300,000 like very quickly. So she was, boom, $300,000 gone. If she could continue to hold on to the property for years to go, that's fine, right? It'll regain its value, no big deal. However, she's losing like anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a month on that property, losing, right? So you've lost $300,000, and now you have to pay an additional $3,600 a year. Sorry, $36,000 a year to run an Airbnb. So she has to keep running the Airbnb and taking care of the guests and everything, and and that's costing her almost like $36,000 a year. So that's one story of somebody who was willing to actually share it, right? And in my mind, I'm like, I know that there's so many other people out there that have done even worse. Even you just saying you lost $20,000 on your first two, same. You know what I mean? Like the exact same. I also lost that amount of money getting up those first couple, and it sucks because usually we're coming from a position where it takes that long to save up for a year, right? But I mean, like, this is why we do what we do. Like, we eventually keep pushing, it gets better, right? But the life of an entrepreneur. But yeah, anyway, so horror stories, right?
That actually kind of goes into my first question that I have for you, because what you have built has a very clear impact for short-term rental hosts moving forward. And so what can you say are like things that you feel like you saw so many people missing that you were like, okay, this justifies me taking the time to build out this technology that other people are going to need? Like, what are main things that you're like, okay, people are just fully missing all of these points?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's one or 2 points that I can like easily point to, but what I could say is that I talked to a lot of people who bought bad properties or rented bad properties. I think the main thing that actually got me was that people were they would I okay, so I started in Chicago, right? And then it wasn't a podcast at the time. It was like some guy's course, and I was highlighted in the course. And I talked to him, and everybody listened, whatever you would call that. And so I ended up giving out my email to a bunch of people, and they all reached out to me. And there were these people that were in Chicago, and I knew Chicago's data extraordinarily well. And so they started telling me about their properties, like where they were, how many bedrooms and bathrooms they had. And I'm sitting there in my head, I'm like, these guys don't even know it, but they have a property that's not going to make them a dime. Like I knew it. I knew how much they were paying. I knew how much they were going to make. I'm like, I know you're not going to make money with that property. You'll figure that out at the end of the year, right? And I knew that my properties were going to be profitable, and I knew that and they were profitable, right? And I was like, that sucks for those people, and it kind of just I don't know. That was literally in 20 like late 2018, 2019, where I was having those conversations with those people, and there was something in that happened where I was like, that really sucks. It's too bad these people couldn't figure out another way to do that, right? Or couldn't figure out a way to be able to find the profitable properties. And I honestly think everything has stemmed from those conversations that I initially had to trying to solve this issue of ensuring that people don't buy an unprofitable property, right? Um, I'm not sure if that answered the question directly. Could you, I think I missed some points that I wanted to say, but that's like the origin story of why I do what I do.
No, it makes sense. I think it's just like so important for people to understand how like this technology is not an easy thing for you to build out, right? Like it takes a lot, and you literally, as we're getting on this call, you're like, oh, yep, I'm still like pulling data points and things like that. And so it's a
Yeah.
lot of work to do it. So to have somebody who creates it for you, and then like you said, you have a software that you're going to be releasing, like it's a huge impact that will be on the industry when people don't have to do all of that work for themselves and risk having a
Yeah.
non-profitable property.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So to kind of expand on like the software and how it's going to help people, right? Just to talk a little bit more about that, because I know you guys have an understanding of it, but the listeners probably don't know too much about it. So the idea of the software is that it allows you to be able to analyze data for a market significantly better than anything else that's out there, to be able to get to be able to make a decision, right? Because I feel like a lot of the softwares exist where they just have, they show a lot of averages, there's a lot of information, but it's not organized in a way that allows you to be able to take action. And so that's how I've sort of set everything up. It's very actionable. You can review it, you go through it, you know that you're looking at the most profitable spot within a market, and you know that the property you're going to purchase is going to make X amount of money, right? And it's set up in a way that allows you to get to that answer very quickly, which is like time is like one of the things that it saves the most of. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but it also gives people a lot of confidence with what they're actually doing because of the way it's structured. So it's just, in my opinion, it's the way that it's set up is the way that data should be consumed, right? And it makes it easy to be able to analyze deals and markets and things like that to be able to get to that right answer. And so the software, when you use it, you can go and look in any market that you want and be able to very quickly see where the most money is, and then be able to quickly figure out the profitability of a property. And if you also understand the process that I go through to be able to make sense of the data, which is the hard part, right? So data is available all over the place, but how to make sense of it is really what I'm doing for people. It's like, hey, this is what I think of when I'm doing it. These are the steps that I'm taking to get to the answer that I'm trying to get to. These are the ways that I avoid the bad information, right? And then if you follow that process and use the tool, the software, which will allow you to speed up the amount of time it takes you to do it, you'll be able to get to that right answer a lot faster with a lot more confidence. I think for the industry that it's going to be very impactful. Obviously, I'm super biased, but I think it's going to be very impactful because there isn't anything that exists out there like it that allows for people to do this. And in my opinion, if you can just get that part right, if you forgot about everything else, messaging a guest, cleaning the home, design, everything, if you forgot about everything and you just ensured that the property that you bought was in the right market, you bought it for the right price, it had the right amount of demand, it had all the right amenities and everything set up, then you could figure everything else out, right? Instead of starting, with instead of starting with a home that's never going to get you there, you have to put like an extreme amount of work in to be able to get there, right? Like you're almost picking these properties that are almost bulletproof in a way, and then you figure everything else out. So I'm trying to reframe everyone's mind from, hey, let's find a property that's nice and let's set it up, to let's make sure that the property without a doubt is going to be profitable, and then we'll figure everything else out from there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the exact mistake that we made in Dallas when we first purchased, or we first signed the leases for those arbitrage units. Is I had the mindset, because I'm so design based, so experience based, that it really didn't matter about the location. It didn't matter about like what other people were making in the market. Like I was going to out design it, and I was going to, create it, and the people will come, was my
Yep.
like naive mindset around these properties. And that couldn't have been further from the truth, right? It didn't matter that mine were the nicest in that complex or the nicest in that area. It was still in that area.
Yep.
And so the clientele, the price that people were willing to stay in that market, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if I had the nicest design, didn't matter if it was the most photogenic, didn't matter if it was Instagrammable. It was never going to make money out the gate. And so I completely agree. It's like, if you can find a property that would make, for us, when we think about it in the Michigan market, when we are eyeing properties that we want to purchase, it's like, okay, I want it to make sense with where people are making money currently, right? Like, and I know that my competition doesn't have good design, doesn't have great photography, doesn't have any amenities, doesn't have, whatever the case may be that we know impacts the overall ROI. But what if I had none of those things and I did a half-assed job? Would it be profitable? And if the
Yeah.
answer is yes, then we start leaning into that upside potential where, like, okay, I'm willing to take these risks in a market where nobody has a hot tub, where nobody has twilight photography, where nobody has these amenities, and we just don't know what that profit is going to be. But it doesn't matter, because even if we make what our neighbors are making, we're making money.
Yeah. I'm so happy you said that about what the Dallas story. That's what I'm trying to stop, right? I'm literally trying to stop people from doing that, where it's like, I'll just make it so nice it doesn't matter and people will come. It's like, no, you're in a part of the city where there's not that much going on. People don't want to go to that part as much as they want to go to the other part, and the rent's the exact same in both areas. So why would you go there? You know what I mean? And it's the same idea for, like, why would you buy a house over here that's the exact same price as the one over here when everyone wants to be over here and they're willing to pay more money to be over here, right? Like, where are the hotels in a city? They're not all over the place. They're in a specific area, right? Why are they in that specific area, right? Like, I feel like more people need to pay attention to what hotels are doing in the Airbnb space, because they're the OGs. They've been around forever. They know what the hell they're doing, right? They have made it work in a lot of these different areas. Let's pay attention to them. Let's understand what they're doing, and let's try to, use some of what they have done for what we are doing, right? Anyways, I agree with what you just said. I'm really happy you said that, because that's what I try to stress.
Yeah, and I like that you said, like, what you're trying to do is help people understand the data, because when we're teaching how to analyze properties, right? We're going from like one software to another, and then we're going into individual Airbnb listings, and it, like, the process really does take, like, we try to make it as quick as possible, but it takes a little bit of time because a lot of the data is spread out over multiple different things. Some of the data points just don't really make sense. And so at this point we're like, yep, okay, so if you do all of these steps, it'll tell you yes or no, and then you have to, like, go upside potential from there and understand what else you can put into it. But understanding the data, I think, is the hardest thing for people. So the fact that that's, like, your main goal, I think will be hugely helpful.
I have literally been pushed back. I have pushed back the launch of the software by, I think, like 3 months now, because of the training. Because I refuse to launch it without the training, because it's not straightforward. You know what I mean? It's not easy. So, like, but once you understand how to do it, then it is easy, right? For the most part. It's still a task, but yeah. So that's my whole thing, is like, both of them will go together. You'll be able to get the software, but you also understand how to use it, and you'll be able to get to the answers. Like, that's the whole goal. I know I've probably said that 10 times now on this call. So.
Well, and for our listeners as well, I mean, we've had exposure to the software, right? Like, we've gotten to use it, we've gotten to experience it, and we've gotten to compare it to AirDNA, to Rabu, to all of these other things that we have used to analyze properties in the past. And yours is significantly pared down in comparison to all of these other options. And so, at first glance, when I was experiencing it for the first time, I was like, this seems like so much less than AirDNA. But it feels like what you've done is you've taken AirDNA, that is this big monster that has a lot of information, and you don't know what information is relevant or not. And, like, for us, our process with AirDNA is very straightforward, and it doesn't look at 80% of the information that they offer, because 80% of it, in our opinion, is pretty irrelevant, right? When it, like, gives the market an overall grade, like, that's irrelevant to us. Like, we don't want to look at that. When it gives you, like, a general idea, when you type in the specific address and it, like, pulls up a number, like, that also really means nothing to us until we look at specific apples to apples properties. And so in using yours, it's like, it just gives you the properties, the revenue, you get to stock the listing. Like, it just pares it down to the information that's most relevant. And I feel like that's such a good play on your part, where you see all of these other data providers trying to provide too much and feel more valuable in the, like, over push of too much information. And yours is like, no, this is what's relevant. Pay attention to this only, and, like, axe the rest.
Yep. That's actually, I'm glad you pointed that out, because that is 100% what I've been trying to do. I have literally said over and over again, I will not put anything on here that is not useful, that is not actionable, right? So useful to me is you can make an action based off of it. You can take an action based off of it, right? And so it, like, I could throw a whole bunch of pretty little things on there, right? And make it look pretty, but I'm like, it's not going to help you take action. I actually had somebody recommend that yesterday where they're like, hey, can you add this? I'm like, yeah, I can add it as long as you can tell me exactly how you're going to use it and how it's actually going to be beneficial for you. Because it was like, I want to see the market ADR and I want to see the market occupancy. I'm like, okay, tell me how you're going to use that. And if you can prove to me that it is actually going to be helpful for you to make that final decision, I'll add it, right? Because I don't use it. I don't need it. And I've been able to do this just fine. So like, I know that you don't need it, right? So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that I purposely have left it very, very empty with only the things that you need to be able to take action and forgotten about everything else. And I actually got that from a story that I heard about Mark Zuckerberg. Apparently when Mark Zuckerberg like first made Facebook, it was very, very limited. It only had a few different things that you could do, but there were a ton of social networks like Facebook that were being built at the same time and also at his campus that I can't remember the school he went to, but he had somebody else who built a sort of Facebook that was, like maybe not a friend of him, but they went to the same school. And obviously Facebook starts taking off. And so the guy goes to him and says like, hey, would you want to buy my software? It's got all these things already built into it. And Mark Zuckerberg's like, no, it's got way too much going on and it's not useful. He's like, I don't want an overcomplicated thing for people. It's like, you just got to make it simple. And so I'm glad you pointed that out because like literally that's how it's built. It looks super simple, but it solves the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and AirDNA has a lot of irrelevant information. Like when we're teaching people, it's like it'll pull up all of these comps for all of these properties, and you'd like to think that like the information that you're getting is relevant. But there are so many subtle red flags on these projections or these, annual revenue, both projections and actual revenue, that tell me that the data is irrelevant, right? Like when a property pulls up and it's got 0 reviews, I'm like, this means nothing to me. Like immediately I'm like, red flag. If there's no reviews, either they're a terrible operator. So if the revenue is suggesting that it's the highest performer in a market, like exit. Like this is null and void. Like I don't need this. And so from both conversations that I've had with you and conversations that I've had with people who have used your technology, it sounds like you've got a much higher bar of process of allowing data into your technology, right? So you're like sorting through like if it's well, I guess kind of talk me through that. Like, how do you qualify the properties that show on your data as relevant data points for us to compare what's happening in the market?
So it's fairly simple, in my opinion. I'm always just trying to make sure I'm looking at good data and not bad data. And literally every single podcast I ever go on, I always talk about this. So anyways, I'll explain it again, but good data, right? What makes something good data? Well, you need a full-time active host, right? And you need to know how much they've made almost an entire year. Okay. So the way that every single software works that has data on Airbnbs, they have algorithms that go into the calendar of every single Airbnb every single day. And so what they're doing is they're recording the calendar and they're figuring out exactly how much that person is making. So let's say that they had 30 days available, right? And every single day was $100. Well, they're going to record that. And then they're going to come back the next day and they're going to see that one day was booked and they're going to understand that that was likely a booking and they made $100 for that night plus whatever the cleaning fee was. And so then therefore that property has made $100 plus cleaning fee so far, right? And then they're going to do that again for the next day and then the next day and then the next day. And they're just going to keep doing it over and over and over again until they get to a full year. And once they get to the full year, we know exactly how much that property's made during the past 12 months, right? Now we have an annual revenue number that we can use for our underwriting and property valuations to be able to determine what the revenue is going to be, right? Or the profit's going to be. Now, if the property was only tracked for 30 days, you can't just take that number and times it by 12 because of the seasonality of this market, of this industry, right? So it might be high season, low season, whatever it may be. And so for me, I need a property to be tracked for at least 250 days to 365 days. If it's been tracked within that time period, I'm missing about 3 months, but I can generally figure out what the remaining 3 months are going to be so that I'm looking at the annual revenue number, right? Annual revenue number is the most important number to me without a doubt. And so once I can have that, I know that it's good data. Now, there's a lot of part-time hosts out there as well. And so how do you ensure that you're looking at an active Airbnb and not just a part-time Airbnb? It's in the reviews. So as long as that place has had a review every single month for the past 12 months, you know that they've been a active full-time host. And so I always look for at least 2 to 3 reviews every single month for the past 12 months, right? And if they have that, then I can trust and believe in that data. And then I know that I'm looking at good data because I it's been tracked for almost a year, and I know I have a full-time host that I'm looking at. If I get the combination of those two things, I have good data, right? And so our algorithm within the software is, removing all properties that are less than 250 days, removing all properties that are less than 20 reviews, and then adding everything else in, and that's essentially all you're looking at, right? And then with that, you still have to check to ensure that there's been a review every single month. But we have a column in there for you that says good data, right? You check it off, yes or no, if it's good data, and then all of a sudden you're just looking at purely good data, right? And you can rely on the information that you're looking at. And to me, just another story to kind of throw in here with all this. The reason this is so important is because I almost signed 2 $7,000 a month leases for these like beautiful new places that were going to be going up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it was right across from the big house, right? Like really nice. And I was super excited about it. Like, these things are going to absolutely crush. The data says that all these homes are making so much money, only to find out that the homes that I was basing it off of, the comps that were apparently making like $150,000 a year, were really only being rented out on weekends for the football games, right? So they're rented out for 8 weekends throughout the entire year at like $2,000 a night. And then they would block off their calendar for the rest of the time. But the algorithm thought that those were bookings. And so it was showing that they're making like $150,000 to $200,000 a year, but I didn't realize that at the time, right? So this is why I stress the good data on every single podcast, because I know for a fact that there are a ton of other people out there that are looking at data and going, oh, this person's making $300,000 a year. I can go buy a $1.5 million property and be profitable, right? Like, I've talked to people who have done that. So anyways, that's why we are strict with the data that we are looking at within the software.
Yes. Preach to the choir. I mean, I love that you're semi-familiar with the Michigan market as well, because it's like we deal with that all the time from a lake house perspective, right? Because so many operators in Michigan are not actual true Airbnb operators. They're throwing their lake house up online on the weekends that they're not renting it in the summer. And so it's taking their summer revenue and it's just multiplying it by 4 for the rest of the year. And as we know, like, summer is the moneymaker here in Michigan. And so if you're projecting those 3 months out of the year that it's rented for the entire year, it's going to look like a property could crush it. But at the end of the day, that's not the case. It's a certain season.
Not the case.
Yeah. When you're looking at these different markets and you're like making your list of priorities, maybe for a property that you're looking at investing in, when you're listing out your priorities, like, do you rank like location, design and amenities? Like, how are you ranking these data points that you're pulling from the market to decide what you need to invest in?
So it's not a perfect math. It's not a perfect science to it. What I'm trying to do is to give myself so many advantages over my competition that I can beat them in the long run, right? But there's no, in my opinion, I haven't found this yet, and I've talked to other people about this. There's no clear way to be able to be like, a hot tub's going to return you X amount more, without a doubt. It's not super clear, right? But sometimes you can know that a hot tub's going to return you more money, right? Because everybody has a hot tub. It's like, all right, that's going to help me boost my revenue, right? So the answer to this is I'm trying to find as many things that will allow me to beat out my competition when I have my listing. So what would that look like, right? As an example, if I see that, people have game rooms, I'm going to make sure that the home that I get has 2 living rooms so that one can be turned into a game room. But I'm also going to focus in on how big is that second living room, and is that second living room on its own in the basement, or is it attached closer to like the kitchen? Because to me, those are 2 different things, right? Because you either the one in the basement is going to be a kid room where the kids can go and the adults can hang out upstairs, and it's going to be this sort of like different setup, which is the most ideal possible setup. Or you have them where they're fairly close to each other and the kids are all going crazy over here, but then the parents are trying to have a good time and it's just not working, right? That's going to make a little bit of a difference. So like, that's a tiny little feature that can make a difference. Then there's other things like, well, everyone's got a pool in their backyard, right? But what I might notice is that some of the top performers actually have a square pool, whereas the other people just have like kind of like regular looking pool, and it's still a pool, but it's just not sexy, right? And so if I'm going to go look for a property, I want to make sure that property has a square pool so that I can have the advantage and the possibility of getting into that top ranking spot, right? And so it's a combination of everything. I'm analyzing all of the top properties. I'm trying to understand everything that they're doing right. Then I'm looking at all the properties that are doing less than them, and I'm trying to understand what they're doing wrong or what they don't have, right? In comparison to the top performing properties. And you can, if you do that, you start to be able to see the differences. It's like, oh, these people have no game room, and these ones have a game room. Therefore, a game room is one of those things that you need to be able to help get yourself into the top of the market, right? And to be able to have a game room, I need 2 living rooms, right? So it's like, it's honestly as simple as that. And it gives you that competitive edge when you actually officially list the property and design it and put it together, so that you're bringing more value to the table in comparison to your competition. And I think that's, every good business provides a lot of value, and an Airbnb listing is a business. And so if your Airbnb listing can provide a lot of value to your ideal demographic, then you are going to be increasing your revenue because you're providing more value, right? And I'm going to give you guys a shout out right now, because I was reviewing properties in Baldwin, Michigan, and or around that area, and I came across one that I thought was absolutely crushing it. And I actually made a whole TikTok about it and everything. And I know you know this, but for all your audience, right? And I made this TikTok about how this property was being very strategic in the way that they designed their property in comparison to their competition, because this property had so much style on the inside, whereas every other person focused on the outside, because obviously in Michigan, the summer is so important. But then you get this one property that's beating everybody else by $30,000 or more, and they've designed the inside extremely well. And so I was like, this is very clearly what's allowing them to make so much more money than everybody else, because they're providing a space that people in the winter would feel comfortable staying at and could enjoy the inside of the property and not just the outside. And now their property is more valuable over a longer period of time. And they're giving more to their potential clients, right? And so I made, this is for the audience, I made a whole video about this. And then I started talking to Sarah about it, and she's like, I wonder if that's my property. I open up my phone and show her. She goes, yep, that's mine. So that was the moment where I was like, you guys, I appreciate you guys now. Like that was proof that you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? I'm like, all right, you got street cred now. Right? Like,
That's what we're
so
going for. But yeah,
yeah, I
I
thought
mean,
that was,
I totally agree. When we're teaching people how to analyze deals, we tell them that it is not going to be a straightforward formula, and that you have to get creepy about deep dive stalking your competitors.
for sure.
Like when you said you were looking at Baldwin, it's not like, oh, I wonder if that's my property. I'm like, no, I know it is.
Yeah.
I know it is, because I know every single one of my competitors. I know exactly what the inside of their houses and the outside of their houses look like. Like if I'm going to be pouring $100,000 plus, like let's be real, each one of these properties cost 150 grand to get up and running.
Yeah.
And so if I'm pouring 150 grand into something, like the competitive beast comes out. I'm like, I have to crush you.
Yeah. As it should. You don't even, it's not even crushing. It's just that you're hitting a different audience. I mean, you can call it crushing all you want, because you are crushing them, right? Like in all reality, but you're going to be grabbing like a different audience that wants a different experience. You're going to get bookings during times when they're not going to get bookings. And it's not their fault. You're not directly pulling people out of their house, right? They're just getting a different group of people who are going to be paying less because they're getting less, right? That's just how it works. It's Motel 8 or the Ritz-Carlton, right? Like which one are you going to stay at?
Right.
So anyways.
Right. Well, and to go on the Michigan tangent a hair longer as well, it's interesting, I think, that people really focus on the outdoor spaces in these Michigan properties because, I mean, we pay attention to the outdoor amenity of having a lake, right? That's why we've specialized in lake houses. But in the summer, in the high season, it's like it really doesn't matter where your property is in Michigan. Your price may be different, but in the summer in Michigan, you're going to be booked. Like, people
Right.
are traveling from all over the nation, coming to Michigan to enjoy the weather. Like, whether you're on a lake, whether you're not on a lake, like the chances are that you are going to be booked highest in the summer. And so in my head, when we talk to people who are entering the Michigan market or for our own properties, I'm like, your focus where you should be pouring your money is how do you curb that seasonality? How do you keep it full in the other 3 seasons of the year where the travel is going to drop? You've already got the outdoor amenity and you've got the high traffic of having it on a lake and it being in Michigan in the summer. Why are we
Yeah.
paying attention to when it's going to die? Like, let's think
Yeah.
about that and how do we curb that? And so that's why
I
we're
love
really
that.
big on game rooms, speakeasies, hot tubs, the whole 9 yards.
I think that's actually such true in every market, um, across the board. Now that like you just saying that, I'm like, because I'm Canadian. I've talked about this a lot about in Canada. If you're going to do it, like how to still get bookings in the winter, stuff like that. But I'm even thinking of like places like Arizona, right? Southern Arizona. If you want to still get bookings in the slow season there, right? What could you be doing? Well, you could be providing a pool heater. You could be providing a hot tub, right? Like you're going to provide these things that are going to give people something to do when it gets a little bit chillier, right? And it's in comparison to Canada and Michigan, it's nothing. It's a joke, right? But at the same time, it's like it's still a little bit colder down there, right? So how could you add value that's going to allow for that? And so I find that anyways, that is interesting to kind of always, if you always just focus on the slow season, your peak season will naturally be great, right? It's almost a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that.
How do we stack that thing in the slow season of the year? Those are the people like I
Yeah,
want 100% of the traffic in the slow season so it makes sense year round.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I like that.
Well, as we wrap up, I have one question for you. And without giving away your competitive edge, and with your technology and TechFester's competitive edge, what are you seeing in the industry like in the next few years? What are some trends that you feel like are really going to start making people stand out? Because even in, I mean, the few years that we've been in this, we've seen such a shift in this industry and people are being forced out. So kind of what do you see that, how do you see that going?
So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't really have a good analogy for it yet, but I'm trying to think of a good one because to me it's so clear. Like it's not even a confusing thing. Airbnb is a new type of business model. It's still new, right, in comparison to most things, and it's still growing. And you still have these people who started as like a mom and pop, or like you said, we're grabbing a couch off the side of the road and throw it into their Airbnb, right? Like you have these old school Airbnbs that could be compared to a Motel 8, right? But what's happening is it's continuing to get more, it's continuing to get better through technology, through professional operators, through providing more value. And there's every single industry in the world goes through these exact same steps, right? Where you kind of got the people who are like the first people who are starting to do it and are figuring it out, and then it just gets a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit. You don't see it all at once, but if you look back, right, and you look back 5 to 10 years on any industry, you go, oh, a lot has changed and a lot has improved, right? And really, it's just these new people coming in that are operating at a higher level, that are just stepping up the game. And now it's like, well, everyone's got to step up the game, right? Like you guys in Michigan are forcing everybody in Michigan to step up the game, right? To be better at what they're doing in comparison to what they have been doing. We saw it in Gatlinburg happen very, very rapidly, right? Gatlinburg, you buy a cabin, you're good to go. Nope. Now you actually need an indoor pool. Now you need an outdoor pool. Now you need a hot tub. Now you need this. Now you need that, right? And it's like, if you want to compete in Gatlinburg, you need all of these things. Otherwise, you're going to be one of those losers who's not getting booked, right? And so to me, again, it's very straightforward and clear. Every single industry continues to improve, get better, add more value. And eventually Airbnb is going to continue to do the same thing and get to that point as well. And so, all these people are talking about Airbnb bust and things not going well and things falling apart. Really, it's just the people who have these Airbnbs that are not as don't have as much value as everybody else nowadays, right? That people don't want to book. Their photos are bad, their design is bad, they really aren't providing a lot of value. And so why would a customer want to book that home when they have these other options? So they're losing out and they're crying about the Airbnb bust, but it's like, nope, just step up your game and keep moving forward, right? Like keep improving. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
Like,
everybody's mad that
yeah.
they suck.
Okay. What'd you say?
I said, yeah, it's just all these people out here are mad that they suck. Now that
Yeah,
you know.
pretty well. Like, I mean, in all honesty, I've been looking at the data. There's very few places that are making less money year over year. There are some places that are, for sure. There's some places that are going down. Some places are a little saturated, stuff like that. But I can almost guarantee the people who are like really crying right now, or I probably shouldn't say crying, but you know what I mean? Like upset is because they have an old property that it's not getting booked as well as it used to. It's like, well, of course not. Look at your competition. It's stepped up their game. Why would they book yours? Right.
Yeah. I have one little tiny piggyback question on this question or this topic specifically before we wrap up. Right now, it's very common to gauge the metric of cash on cash as a telling point of where, like, whether it's worth pursuing this property or not.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that metric is going to go away at some point? And the reason I ask is because you've got operators like ourselves who have been in these properties for multiple years, have continued to reinvest in the property. And so the cash on cash metric that we had when we entered, the property was not only less expensive, but we didn't need to pour as much money into the property for it to be profitable. And as time goes on, you'll be competing against operators who will have had these properties for years and years and who will have continued to reinvest. And so your barrier of entry to get in inherently is significantly higher than it was years ago. So do you think we'll see, as time goes on, that cash on cash metric go way down or not be existent, and us be paying attention to different numbers and it just being a longer term play where you're not, you know, getting a return on your money in under 2 years or whatever the case may be? Or do you think it'll kind of balance and we'll see it kind of hit a cap where investors will just like hold it to a certain point and not decide to make these properties more extravagant?
Truthful answer is I have not a clue. If I'm being, not a clue. The idea of like cash on cash not being existent, you're saying that people are making 0% on their money. That would be non-existent, right? I can't see that being a thing ever, even in any sort of real estate, right? Like, you're always trying to do like what I could say is that from my understanding, and I don't have a ton of experience in long-term rentals, but you know, from my understanding is that people don't buy properties for cash flow, especially anymore, right? When it comes to long-term rentals, they're not looking for cash flow. What they're looking for is a property that needs to be fixed up, that they can add value to, that they can then refinance and be able to pull their money out that way, right? Or hold it for 10 years or do whatever, but they know that they're not going to be able to make the money from the cash flow. I think naturally as markets continue to mature, there is going to be a maximum amount that people are going to be able to make from a property. I think that's 100% true because hotels are so optimized and they only make so much money. You're only going to spend so much to stay at a hotel for a night, right? Same thing is going to be for an Airbnb. And so there are caps to how much Airbnbs can make. And naturally, if the market continues to increase how much the home values are going to be over time, then your cash on cash is going to continue to go down. So I think the answer would be yes. Logically, the cash on cash will continue to shrink. And maybe you'll see people being okay with a 5% return or a 10% return, and it is what it is, and they kind of, that's what it's going to be like. And I mean, we're already seeing that in some markets, right? Some markets are already like that. I'm not going to name them because some people would be upset if I name them, but there's certain markets where you're barely breaking even, right? But you have the value of that property, and the value, the equity in the property is more important to them than the cash flow, right? And so different types of investors, in my opinion. So I don't know. I mean, logically, yes, it would be the answer, but can I say without a doubt, no? And do I think it's going to happen in the next like 2 to 3 years? Not a chance. I think that's like a 10 to 20 year thing. Because there's so many markets that are barely mature, right? If Gatlinburg's pretty mature, all of Michigan is not, right? So it's like there's a lot of room to grow in Michigan and a lot of these other states too.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Well, beautiful. All right. I think that is all the questions we've got for you today. So for our listeners who have listened to this and fallen in love with your work like we have, tell them where they can find you.
So this is my recommendation for everybody, is that if you found any of this useful, valuable, helpful, whatever it may be, don't reach out to me right away. Go to my YouTube and watch my free stuff. I got free, almost all my videos are about half an hour long, teaching you something, right? Teaching you a process. Then I have 3 free courses that you can go through as well. If you go through all of that free content that I have, it is going to be extremely valuable for you. You're going to learn a lot more about what I know. And then when you do reach out, we'll have a very educated conversation and you'll be going in the right direction, right? And you'll be asking me questions that are going to be, stuff that is more relevant to ensuring that you're making a good purchase, right? Rather than the sort of basic stuff that is available for free. So I just strongly recommend that you start there. You can also follow me on, TikTok, Instagram at the Airbnb Data Guy. Put up little fun videos every once in a while, teaching little things. And join one of my newsletters and keep an eye out for when the software comes out and when the training comes out and all those different things that are going to be coming out very, very shortly. So it might actually be out by the time this podcast release. So anyways, yeah, appreciate it.
Beautiful. All right. Well, and Emily, do you want to wrap up for us as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys know you can find us at the Karwells on all social media platforms, and the Karwells.space is our website if you want to look further into our portfolios and our mentorship that we offer. And yeah, that's where you can find us.
Beautiful. And we will have all of his handles linked below if you guys are interested in finding him a little bit easier than listening to it via audio. So check him out. Definitely highly recommend it. And thank you again, John, for coming on and talking all things data with us. We really appreciate it. To our listeners, thank you for consuming another episode, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.